Hello and welcome, Exiles, to the Day 2 update to the Mana Righteous Fire build. We'll go ahead and showcase a Purifier. We have been doing Guardian rotations and got our 4 Void Stones now. We did our Uber Elder and our Maven. And I'm going to show you a bit of what the upgrades we've done are. So you'll notice right out the gate we have the Maven boots, which give you basically the, if you kill an enemy, they emit a fire dot wave to nearby enemies, which helps our clear out quite a bit, where we can just kind of coast through packs of mobs and still get quite a bit of like satisfying clear on it. I don't have a great roll on it, so it's only like 30%, 32% chance for the explode from the scorch boots to occur. It can roll up to like 40%, so missing a bit there, but that's okay. It's just the roll we got when we dropped it from Maven. And the biggest changes we made since yesterday mostly have been single target upgrades. We are, of course, tankier than we were yesterday by a decent margin, but the bigger upgrades came offensively speaking. If we were going to go ahead and hover the tooltip on Righteous Fire, you'll see it says 980,000, so we're almost at 1 million tooltip on Righteous Fire, whereas yesterday it was more like 400k or something. So we've over doubled our base dot damage. But not only that, we have the scorch from the boots, which is minus res, which means more damage. We have higher minus res on enemies because we got quality on our scorching ray, and we picked up a mastery that has another -5. So between those things, it's like another minus 20 something res. On top of all of that, we also added shock into the build. We'll see on the tooltip here, when we go to kill a boss, you'll notice a 15 to 20% shock, and that's through one of my new favorite graphs, which is the glowing silhouette graph. Now, I wrote this graph off a long time back in Keepers League because somebody in my chat said, oh, that doesn't do anything, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just trust this random chatter. I shouldn't have done that. This is actually extremely reliable shock consistently on enemies, and I'll show it right here. Look at this enemy right here, 14% scorch, 15% shock right away, and it can stack up. It can do multiple like silhouettes in a row. I've seen up to 24% shock on Shaper even. You'll see the shock's already there again. We phased them. Our damage is clearly a lot better, and this silhouette is definitely a large contributing factor to that. What other upgrades have we done on the character? We swapped to now 2 Foulborn Kikizarus, and we did 6-link our Ivory Tower. That's probably the most investment we did yesterday. With the biggest investment was getting the 1500 fusings to 6-link him. Right now fusings are actually pretty cheap. They're like 5 to 1 chaos, and that's because of the Keeper's tree, the Divine Genesis tree, or whatever it's called. Like, I'm not remembering right now. This gives a bunch of 6-links, which means most builds that have like a rare chest piece, they already have their 6-link. They don't need fusings, which means fusings are at a much lower demand than normal. So definitely would recommend trying to 6-link this up. You can do it through fusings. You can do it through the beast recipe with a Black Morrigan. That's a 6-link method, or Omen of Connection. I generally would recommend checking the price of all 3. A lot of times, Black Morrigan, for example, can be cheaper than buying the fusings. The one thing about that, the caveat is, if you fail to do the fight, then you lose the beast, and there's that risk factor to it. So keep that in mind when you're going to 6-link your chest. So damage upgrades: 6-link the chest, scorch boots, shock from glowing silhouette, extra minus res because we picked up this -5 mastery, and we got quality on our scorching ray. The quality gives -5, so minus extra 25 res. We've upgraded our mana pool, so that was more base damage. We added a 6-link, and we got glowing silhouette. Those are some of the big damage upgrades. Some of the other damage upgrades is we've been using our trade search to find better and better weapons. This was about a 15% damage upgrade from my old weapon. So definitely, whenever you're like thinking about, oh, I need a weapon upgrade, go ahead and do, you'll go over here, you'll say, okay, rare wand, adjust for waiting. You could click something like this. Sort by weight gives you generally a pretty high DPS weapon. Don't necessarily overpay for something like this. Shop around and see if there's any like cheaper options, like something like this. 5D dot multi, open suffix for fire dot multi. Technically there's an open 2. Is that 2 open prefixes? Yeah, that's 2 open prefixes, because that's just hybrid mana spell damage. You could craft fire dot multi, double slam, maybe you hit spell damage on your double slam, like something like that. Don't necessarily overpay for it. Shop around. but always be looking for that weapon upgrade. And then last but not least in weapon or damage upgrades, and this is something that won't pay off immediately, but will pay off over time, is start investing into getting awakened gems. So I bought myself an awakened control destruction, awakened burn damage, awakened LE focus. You'll know none of them are leveled up. I just bought them and started getting that XP. These give you on average, when you have, well, technically we could get awakened swift, but awakened swift was a little bit more expensive, so I didn't get that one yet. But start purchasing these, get them leveling on your character. They're already going to be in immediately like 2% more damage per gem that you get. Upgrade over the regular level 20 version, and then when they get to awakened, they're collectively like 10% more, 5% more, 6% more, 5% more. Like, it adds up quite a bit with these gems. So buy yourself some awakened gems and start getting them leveled up. Now is a pretty decent time to buy, I would say. For example, if I was going to search up, let's say, awakened control destruction, there are a bunch on trade for 60 chaos. That's not too bad. Another thing that yesterday we were saying, oh, there's no ivory towers on trade. They're starting to come into the market. They're down to 50C now. There's 43 on trade. Whereas yesterday when I made this video at this exact time, there was 0 on trade. Don't worry, they're going to keep going down. They're going to keep getting more saturated into the market as more and more players getting to the mapping level where they can actually drop these. They should become more and more affordable for those that want to swap over from Firestorm into the Ivory Tower setup. Real quick, going to cut this in the video because I forgot to talk about it, which is helping your net sustain get better and better. Now, when we swapped to 2 Foulborn Kikizaros, we dropped a lot of flat regen we were getting from Kikizaro. To counteract this and to basically help our net sustain be better, I would recommend investing into max res jewels. Things like this that say max res fire plus 2%. This can be had by getting any jewel that has any max percent roll and then swapping the resistance around. You will notice on the live search that I had for you guys for the rare jewels right over... where do I have it? Right here. You'll notice if you open the filter, there's a count tab down here, which specifically has one of any of the resistances. What this does is it applies the weighted sum search and forces a jewel that has max res on it. So you could buy a jewel like this that has fire damage, double res, and if you do cold to fire res, it will swap this to maximum fire res. And you can just keep swapping the res back and forth until you get maximum 2 fire res. You do not need to divine the jewel. And this is a good way to get max res into the build. Ultimately, part of the way we're going to get to the part where we can drop Rise of the Phoenix, when we add clusters, we're going to add more max res jewels, which will make it so we don't feel bad about losing the max res from Rise of the Phoenix. So that's what is going on there. Hopefully that makes some sense. On top of getting max res jewels, we also swapped to the Tukohama Pantheon, regen 2% while stationary. So whenever you're standing still, you'll notice the regen right now we have 1700 versus when I'm moving, it's 1500. So it's about 200 regen we're getting from just this Pantheon. As well as that, we are also getting a bunch of regen from this flask right here. You need an item level, I believe it's at least 80 to get to roll the gain 3 charge mod. You alt spam for it, and then you benchcraft on regen. This is very good uptime because we are just sitting there tanking monsters hitting us. That means this is going to be almost permanently up when we're fighting mobs. And this flask, A, gives us max res, which means we take less damage from fire, but B is also providing that regen. So that flask with gain charge when hit and a use when full, that'll really help your net sustain feel much, much better. Without the flask and the Pantheon and the max res, you're going to be just barely net sustaining and it's going to be feeling very awkward. So make sure you get those 3 things to help your sustain out. Another thing I want to talk about planning wise for the build, the tree looks relatively similar. I haven't messed around with it too much here. I'm still level 94. I've just been kind of in this stationary stalling pattern. I want to prepare you guys for the next big upgrades for this character is going to come through the source of cluster jewels. Specifically, what we want to look for is high amounts of passives with an 84 jewel. So we can start trying to craft for T1 int, T1 attribute, T1 all res, T1 specific res like lightning res, mana, effects, stuff like that is what we're going to start looking for. These are going to be done through like Reforge Fire, Reforge Cold, Reforge Lightning, those sorts of things. And the reason we're going to start looking towards the cluster is our end game setup. when we start to really push these mana numbers up. Right now we have a very basic setup and a pretty basic tree. Nothing's too crazy going on here. We're gonna start pushing for Choir of the Storm. Right now the Choir of the Storm prices are kind of crazy. I'll show you them right now. They're like 6-7 divs. Yeah, they're 6-7 divs. I don't think this is really worth it at this point. I'd rather just get my own through the tree. I don't think this is a particularly rare item to get. I've gotten multiple from Keepers League from the tree. So ultimately, running a lot of like ancient tree gifts, I'm gonna keep doing that, see if I can generate one myself. I'm not really willing to buy at this price. Maybe if they were like 3D, I would be like, yeah, that's a good price. But for right now, that's what we're working towards. We're working towards getting that Choir, and then all of a sudden, every single extra gear piece we can, we're going to start trying to push lightning res onto. Specifically, clusters is a very big spot to do that. Getting tattoos might end up being worth over int. I'm not sure. I will test that. So that's one of the things we're working towards. And then, for example, right now I'm still wearing Doedries. I should have rare gloves here. We want to look for gloves with like mana, ES. You can get damage per int implicit. You can get fire dot multi. There's some really useful stats you can roll. So stuff like that is what we're going to start working towards. Yeah. That's just some basic outline of the upgrades we've made on the character. Another big thing we'll work towards is right now I have Purity of Elements. I want to eventually go into using Tempest Shield on this character. We have Brine King, which gives us Freeze Immune. Eventually, late game, we can get Chill Immune from our boots. And then Shock Immune is the trifecta we're working for. If we get those three things, we are set on ailments. People say, oh, but what about Ignite? We're going to be a character going for 90 fire res and a bunch of regen. Ignite ends up being not too relevant in that case. Then you talk about Scorch. If you overcap your res, you're fine. And quite frankly, Brittle is no big deal, except if you're in a crit map. And quite frankly, if you're in a crit map, that's when you want to start looking into other solutions, like, for example, crit reduction, not necessarily being Brittle immune. And the reason why I want to shift away from Purity of Elements to doing something like Tempest Shield is it frees up the slot to go for something like Malevolence, which gives us a big damage multiplier. Or we could go the tank option and go for things like Arctic Armor plus Flesh and Stone and start trying to push our tank up. Purity of Elements is only a stepping stone for us, and this is just some of the progress we're going to start looking for. So anyways, that's an overlook of the day 2 upgrades. A lot of damage upgrades, a lot of things that won't cost you too much money. Things like Glowing Silhouette go a long way. Getting some mana rolls on it, getting that shock was useful. Honestly, getting a Return to Dust, I didn't mention this earlier, but getting a Return to Dust level 30, these things just deal a decent amount of damage. So it's some extra DPS. Late game of this character, we're going to drop this, but early on, when you don't have that much of insane DPS, Return to Dust by itself is like 500k DPS or something. Like it's a pretty good chunk of damage, and you can buy a lot of level 30 Return to Dust for like 2-3C. Just get one, chuck it on your character. It helps, you know, bridge the gap of having bad damage initially when you're really weak gearing. I'd highly recommend it. And then aside from that, going for things like Legacy of Fury really, you know, buffs up your clear, feels very good. That's some of the progress we went for on today. And the next day's update, we're going to push towards hopefully Choir and some clusters. That's the sort of goal that we're shooting for. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this update to the Mana Righteous Fire Hierophant. Take care, Exiles, and peace out. Have a good one.